Everyone, welcome to another check-in. So the purpose of this really is we saw that there was a ton of activity happening within the maker community, and particularly around MakeHaven. And we wanted to be sure that people were aware of what was happening, able to make connections, identify where there was gaps in material or knowledge, and hopefully fill those gaps quickly and effectively. It's been an exciting couple of weeks as far as what we have been able to achieve, and I'm glad we're able to walk through and have people share those items. I know we're going to be joined by someone from the city of New Haven that was just going to give us a little bit of their perspective, but I don't think they're on the line yet. Is there someone from the city of New Haven here? Okay, so they must be running a little behind. We'll just jump backwards and go to them after. Someone just wrote in the chat, so there is a chat to the side. Since we have a bunch of people with a bunch of different backgrounds, and I don't think we're going to have enough time to go through and have everyone do an introduction, it would be great if you just put your name, affiliation, whatever you're interested in, any small introduction in the chat in the side. That way we can follow up, or other people can connect with you if there's a reason to connect. And that chat can be accessed in the top corner where there's like a little speech bubble. All right, so I'm going to go right into doing updates. Also, send a message in the chat if you want to add an update to the list. Just let us know, and we will we'll put you on there. The first one to go with is the AmboVent Ventilator. So Lior, you've been leading a team. Do you want to sort of walk through what's been happening with that?
Yeah, you bet. So we have a pretty kick-butt team made up of 3 sort of broad and slightly overlapping groups: medical, electrical, and mechanical. And we've made a lot of progress over the past, I think, just a week, which is pretty crazy. So it's for people who aren't familiar, this is based on a design coming out of Israel. It ranked really highly on a comparison of other DIY ventilators, so that's why we chose it. And we have been working diligently in concert with that original team to develop our own with some slight modifications, and we're really close to being done with our first iteration. So after this first iteration, we'll do some testing, both of the design and then of each individual model, or each individual unit that we make. We'll be doing testing in a simulation laboratory with mannequin humans and fake lungs and whatnot to make sure that this isn't going to hurt anyone. And then we will stress test it to the best of our abilities, so that if this were to be used, we could be as confident as possible that it would stand up to the test, and we would be able to sleep at night. So with that, I'm just going to show you where we are so far, at least the parts that are easily showable. The mechanical stuff is pretty much done. All that's left is getting the last of the electronics plugged together, but I mean, they're pretty much there. So I'll show you. I'm just going to try to flip my camera around, so bear with me for 1 second. Nope, that is.
Okay, so we're
working on it.
All right, looks like you're flipped around. Yep.
All right, so this is where we are. And okay, so the BVM, or bag valve mask, or Ambu-Bag, depending on what floats your boat, sits here and gets actuated by this arm. So it's a super simple setup. In general, a BVM is just used as either in an emergency setting to provide breaths or as a transition before someone's attached to a ventilator. But in this case, we're using it as the ventilator source of air. So oxygen comes in the back end, this pushes it, and this acts as a really simplified version of a ventilator. So it doesn't have all the fancy features, it just has the most basic features, the ones that have been identified as being crucial for the majority of COVID patients, certainly not all. And just in case this wasn't totally evident, this is a last resort option that we hope doesn't get used, but we want to have it on the table so that if the day comes where it is needed, we have it already made. So pretty much done. I can take off this unattached front cover just to show you the inside for those who are interested. There's a motor down here that turns a shaft that pulls this guy up and down and squeezes the bag. So there's more to it, obviously, but that's kind of the gist. Feel free to jump into the COVID ventilator channel on Slack if you're interested, or email me if you want to know more or get involved. So that's that. Our next steps are testing this version and working on the next iteration to work out some of the just finer tuning things, and then working with manufacturers to make sure that this is scalable, that this is something that they could make and sell both nationally and internationally as a stopgap solution. So that is kind of where we're at.
Great. Are there any gaps in our knowledge or skill or materials that are blockers or slowing us down right now that would be good to source from a wider group?
Good question. At the moment, I don't think so. I feel like we're pretty well supported. A lot of manufacturers have been really generous with offering their knowledge and tools. We're really lucky to have a bunch of great people on the team. If there are either electrical or mechanically minded people with free time to help put these together, would definitely please get in touch so we can once we get this ball rolling. And so our goal is to bring this to manufacturers to produce at scale. But at MakeHaven we could produce somewhere between 5 and 100 of them, and we would need more hands to get that done.
Yeah. So the physical, the actual assembly is what you're talking about of the electronics. Yeah.
No harm getting in touch sooner rather than later.
Great. Did folks from the audience have any questions? If you do, you can either put it in the chat now, or you can just ask via voice. And there'll be time at the end as well. So I see. Okay. Well, I think we can do the other questions at the end. Thank you, Lior, for the update on that one. I saw that Steve Fontana looked like he came in at one point. Are you here, Steve, or somebody else from the city? All right, maybe not. Okay, let's go to the next thing on the. Oh yeah.
Yeah, I had a question. What's just the theory of operation besides it's a pump? Does it also sense the pressure? Can you talk at all about the microcontrollers involved and what it's doing besides just squeezing that thing?
Yeah, I mean, on a high level, I'll just sort of, obviously we can get as in depth as you want later, but on a high level, there's a pressure sensor that detects the pressure it's outputting. In terms of the inputs, you get to tell it the respiratory rate, so how quickly it's providing those breaths, the tidal volume, how much air how much it's squeezing the bag each time. You can set the pressure that it's applying, so it'll max out at a certain pressure. If the elasticity of someone's lungs becomes limited, it won't exceed that pressure. And you can set the PEEP, the positive end expiratory pressure, pretty sure, which helps to keep the alveoli open at the end of a breath so they don't collapse and get inflamed. So those are the inputs. There's a pressure sensor. Maybe down the road there'll be an O2 sensor. On fancy ones, there'll be CO2, but that might even be measurable using equipment still in the hospital. In terms of how do you sterilize it, the The only part that should be, well, actually, none of this should have any patient air in it. So the air comes out of here and then goes to a patient, and there should be a filter in line as well as on the exhaust. This is generally disposable, so this would be per patient. If you had to sterilize it, I mean, that is another story. In terms of the machine itself, if you wanted to sterilize it, you could just use a spray, any of the number of sprays that they use in a hospital. Spray it down, spray the insides. You can spray it top to bottom. It's made right now of aluminum. It might be made out of stainless steel in the future.
Leo, or is the squeezy ball, for lack of a better term, widely
Yeah.
available? That's not a concern?
I mean, everything's a concern right now, but that is a widely used tool in medicine and hospitals and ambulances. So it's pretty widely available. I would certainly recommend to any and all hospitals right now to not be throwing things out. I mean, the bug will die on its own in max 2 weeks, depending on the surface it's on. So if they just leave the things in a room, that'll do a decent job of disinfecting them. So, but in general, this is a disposable thing that they have a lot of. We got 4 here just for testing different styles of them. Here's a different one. There's a few more over there.
What's it called?
A so the generic name is a BVM, bag valve mask. Normally this goes on the patient's face because this is used when you're doing CPR and you need to provide artificial ventilation. The brand name here is an Ambu-Bag.
And Colin wanted to know about injecting oxygen.
Yep. So on the back side here is the oxygen line. This plugs into a flow meter on the wall of the hospital. So the oxygen comes in the back. In general, on a ventilator, you control the FiO2 or the fraction inspired oxygen by percentage. Here you would control it by volume. So on the wall, on the flow rate, you would, well, I guess you control the flow rate. So it'll inflate this bag on the back, and we would just come up with a calibration table. So you would just check the table and say, well, if we have these various settings on the ventilator, then we can set the flow rate here and have an equivalent FiO2. So that's how the oxygen comes into the mix.
Great. And I think we should probably move on, and we'll have another chance for questions at the end. But thank you, Lior, and thanks to the awesome team at MakeHaven, but also to the great work that the folks actually developed this over in Israel and then shared those plans did. So it's cool to have an international collaboration, and hopefully some of our improvements will inform the designs that get built elsewhere in the world. So our next one, Kate, do you want to talk about the evolution and development of the mask sewing and where we are with that?
Sure, I can talk about that real quick. At this point, I think we're rolling pretty well. We have well over 100 volunteers around Greater New Haven and even out of the state a little bit. People who are sewing masks. We've created a page, which I put into the chat, makehaven.org/face masks. And you can go there for pattern information. There is no-sew patterns and things like that for people who are looking for masks for personal use. We have a couple of Yale-approved patterns that they're looking for, specifically masks that will hold a surgical mask in a pocket for their use. And then we have just general patterns that can be used for the community. We have to date distributed somewhere like 820 directly. So we have 820 masks that we're working with United Way. They're going to different organizations that have requested them, nursing homes, hospice, homeless shelters, groups like that. So we're facilitating that, and we're just continuing to make them to try to meet that need.
Great. And Kate, so I understand that there's still community nonprofits that are on that need list that are still looking for face masks?
Yeah, we're getting new requests in every day. So the need continues to grow, and we're just trying to catch up with it. We're getting requests daily. But yeah, we do still have several that are still waiting for masks. We're still looking for more people to sew. Basically how United Way is distributing them is we're doing batches of 25. So a group who may want 100 will get 25, and then they'll get 25 more to kind of spread it out so that multiple organizations can at least have some. And they're also looking at the need and, you know, things like that, like in the nursing homes where the virus is now present and things like that.
Yeah, and we've also gotten requests from for-profits, you know, where we haven't been necessarily granting them the volunteer-made masks, but we've been connecting with so that they can buy it from local sewers. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, and maybe a little bit about our efforts to leverage local sewers with donated dollars to support where we can't?
Yeah, absolutely.
Volunteers. Yeah.
So we've been talking to different people who are who may not be sewers who are interested in helping out. So we do have on our page, we do have a list of professional sewers, many of whom are out of work or otherwise impacted by COVID-19 closures, you know, costume designers, things like that, who are sewing them for purchase. And so that information is on our webpage. We're also working with those individuals we have a donation program now where people can donate specifically for face masks and face shields, and their money is translated directly into an order of face masks that will be fulfilled by one of these people who is in need of work, one of these professional sewers. So you can donate $50 and that will make you know, X number of masks, and that $50 will go straight to the person who is sewing to cover their time and their work so that they have some income as well. So it's kind of a win-win. So that's a cool option there. And we also just have a general donation for all of the COVID-19 efforts that MakeHaven is working on. So if people don't have the skills but want to get involved that way, we have ways to donate right on our homepage at MakeHaven.
Great. Thank you, Katie. And so if anybody is interested in doing sewing, Kate's a great contact, and there's plenty of information on the website which tells you how to sign up and gives you instructions. And there have been regular meetups where people get to sew together, online sew together, and they have been learning and inspiring each other. So that's great. Thanks for coordinating.
Yeah, I'll add one more thing about that. Yeah, we're having regular virtual sewing circles Wednesdays at 5:15 and Saturdays at 11 a.m. That's all on the MakeHaven events page. And so that's a great place to start if you have questions or anything like that. People are coming together, all different levels of experience to work together. I did see something pop up quickly on the chat about the Yale approved specific pattern. There's been a lot of discussion about that pattern. It is a trickier pattern. We actually had one of our sewers who's working with us made a video that meets all of Yale's other requirements, but it's a much simpler pattern. It doesn't have that center seam, it doesn't have curves, but it does meet all their requirements for the surgical mask and the nose wire and all those kinds of things. So we posted that. It's a great thing to come out of here so that people can make that mask a little bit quicker, and that can be used both for Yale as well as for our community partners, either without a filter since it's double layer, or we can put that coffee filter that the CDC recommends in for community use. So those are all up on our site.
Great, thank you. So I think we'll, if there were any questions, we could take some, any questions? Otherwise we'll jump to the next project. So I think we're going to the next one. We can always ask questions at the end too if you had something. So there's the plastic face shields, which I think, so Leor has been part of that, but Aaron also, and I don't know if we have anyone else who is working on that. So maybe start with Leor jumping in, and then others who have been helping him.
Sure, yes. So as with most of the projects that MakeHaven's been working on, our goal is not to fill a long-term supply need. Getting some feedback through someone.
Yeah, I think it's, it looks like it's Tyler. Here, I'll mute.
Okay, thanks.
Oh, Leor, somehow I muted you. So
right.
Please unmute yourself, yeah.
Yep. So our goal has been to help provide for the interim need, not for the long term. So for the face shields, we made ballpark somewhere around 2,000 face shields And just as an example, face shield looks something like one of these guys. And just foam headband,
Can you hold
elastic.
it out a little further? Yeah. Yeah.
So like that.
Yep. That's it.
Yep. And we're starting to, so we found a few places that will make them for us or for other people. So we're not acting as a broker, but now we can point people towards manufacturers who are doing this for profit. We have both the large volume and low volume sources. So one is Modern Plastics in Shelton, Connecticut, and they make a kind very similar to these. And then there's also manufacturers in China that take about 7 days to get here, but they can produce 250,000 in a day. So sort of the full end of the spectrum. You can, if you get in touch with a hospital system that needs a lot of face shields, then we have that, and it's all on the website. And if you know a grocery store that wants 10 face shields for their worker, then we found a supplier for that too. So that is kind of the status with the face shields. Recently, we got a bunch of face shield material from Tyler, which was fantastic because that let us make the shields for the New Haven fire and police departments. So they were very grateful for that. I handed those off to Rick Fontana of Emergency Services. And also, just throw it out there, Cedric from Sacred Heart University dropped off a whole bunch of 3D printed Prusa design face shield bands. So if anyone has the plastic cut out for those, then we have those headbands. Yeah, if any other questions or thoughts?
Hey, would we be able to get those headbands from Cedric? We still have the shields for those.
Yes, sir. We have them in 2 trash bags here at MakeHaven.
Okay, I'll arrange for someone to come on up to you guys.
Love it.
Awesome. Great. So, I mean, I think this, so thank you to all the volunteers and the folks that, helped us to do like the in the gap when it was really important. And it's great to see that there's some of these larger volume players becoming available. And so pretty much, Lior, we're done with, have we exhausted most of our materials that way with the face masks?
So we have not entirely exhausted our supplies. So if someone needed, if the city of New Haven came to us and said, hey, 100 of them tomorrow because for whatever reason, then we could call on volunteers and try to fulfill that need, because we do have the materials and we do have people who are generous with their well-being and their time to help make those. However, that's, given that there are other suppliers who can do it in a reasonable amount of time for a reasonable price, that's not really something that I'm pushing on at any rate. Great.
Well, thank you, Lior. And I hate to call on you again, but do you want to just talk about the intubation chambers? Is that sort of a related story as far as the prototyping and then now production?
So this is not a novel idea, just to preface this, but it is something that is recently found to be pretty important. And the idea is that when you're intubating a patient, that is putting an endotracheal tube down their trachea to help them breathe because they can no longer breathe on their own for whatever reason. Especially right now, we're really afraid of all of the aerosols that process produces. So in general, you wear reasonable PPE while you're doing that. And now that is still even more so the case, but we want to be even more precautious when doctors are doing that procedure. And so people have been making these intubation shields. And I'm trying to find one that's easy. They're all kind of on their sides, but so this, let's see, here's one. I'm just trying to look at my screen so I can see what you're saying. Here we go. So the idea is that the patient is lying on a stretcher with their head in this box. So, and their torso and legs and all the rest of their body is pointing out that way. And we have a bunch of pictures probably on Facebook and other places where you can see these actually in the Yale Simulation Laboratory. You can see them being tested, and they are currently in use at Yale New Haven Hospital, being used every day. So there's a Dr. Rainier Van Tonder who approached me through a friend about developing these because he found one that had been made at the School of Architecture, but it didn't fit the beds or the patients or the tools that they used at the hospital. So we went through a few different design iterations to come to these dimensions that work both for the beds and the patients and for the type of intubation tools that they use at the hospital. So after going through those design processes, we tested them thoroughly and then took those specifications and brought them to a manufacturer who is now making them. And so anyone can call Modern Plastics and say, hey, we want the Yale New Haven or MakeHaven design of intubation chamber, and they will get that. And so that's made for a normal striker stretcher, also works on most OR beds. It has, you know, a head thing here and little feet to help keep it on the bed so it doesn't slip off. You can obviously put holes in it if you want suction. There's actually another physician who has other opinions about what it should look like, so we might be modeling up her design as well, because in different situations you might want different features. And we may actually, so the ones that are here were made at the School of Architecture according to our designs, but they didn't use the right kind of glue, so they fell apart. So I'm just doing a little bit of recuperation here with some glue. And then these are, just to say it again, because it is kind of crazy, being used right now in the hospital when patients need to be intubated, which happens many times a day, unfortunately. So that is the story of these intubation shields. And yeah, I think it's a pretty cool story of how we can take an idea and make a design and mock it up and then do this really rapid prototyping, especially being just a few blocks away from the hospital. And then within a week, have it being produced at scale by local manufacturers. And just as another shout out, that connection was made through Jamie Scott to help us connect with Modern Plastics in terms of a manufacturer that could make these boxes.
Yeah, Jamie Scott's the president of the New Haven Manufacturers Association. So,
are there any other? Sorry,
Jared, I'm going to mute you just because we're getting some background noise. You can unmute. Sorry, go ahead, Kyle.
Okay, yeah, no, thanks. Yeah, Leo, are there any other hospitals in the area that have come forward requesting these intubation shields, or are there other bed sizes that we are considering trying to mock up a design and maybe send over to Modern Plastics to fit, different manufacturer style beds or things like that? I know they're relatively standard, but
yeah. So there are a lot of different designs. Some, and it kind of just depends on the physicians that are doing it and yeah, sort of where they are. Some people really want to have a really good seal on it. So normally what they'll do is they'll take a central line sheet and put it over the whole thing so that the patient will be sort of sheeted in.
I see.
They also, for people who work in surgery, they have these clear sheets they use for fluoroscopy. So they sometimes prefer that, so you can keep eyes on the patient's body, chest visualization, whatnot. And so that's sometimes they want like a strip around the edge. In terms of bed sizes, so certainly other hospitals have requested these, and I pointed them to Modern Plastic. Hartford Hospital, Griffin Hospital, Danbury, I think some others in Massachusetts.
Okay,
but
great.
I haven't gotten to dive into what beds they use or their bed sizes.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, but at this point, if Modern Plastics doesn't have, if it doesn't fit their bed size, is Modern Plastics turning them away? Or are they saying, send us your information, maybe we can make them a little smaller? Or
yeah, so actually, I think someone had already approached Modern Plastics with another design.
I see.
So, this is obviously not a very complicated thing. It has like 3 dimensions or 4. Something we fiddled a bit with was the height of the armholes. That's a little bit touchy because before we used to they used to intubate people horizontal, and now they're doing it in like a semi-Fowler position. So that kind of changes the height of the armholes you want them at. So that changed a bit, but I would say that, it's pretty flexible. This isn't like a huge company that can't pivot a little bit to a different size.
Cool. Oh, that's awesome. I'm glad to hear this project is getting a lot of traction.
Yeah, definitely.
Great. Were there other questions? Where are these things? So Harvey was asking if I can unmute. We can't unmute. It has to be the person that unmutes themselves. And Leor, I know you were looking at the thing that went over your head, but that has that gone anywhere, or is that?
Yeah. So this is actually, and I apologize to everyone that MakeHaven looks like such a mess. It is because I've just been running around and not being responsible at cleaning. Trying to use one hand to get this thing. This is a mock-up of, so the PAPR hoods, the powered air purifying respirators that they use at Yale New Haven have disposable front shields, and they were running out of those shields. So this was an attempt at fabricating one that actually was kind of fine, but we found another plastics manufacturer in Connecticut that is able to produce them at scale. So that was just a super quick turnaround, and now they're producing hundreds of them. So that is luckily out of our hands.
Cool. I'll just share a picture of what that looks like so that people know what that is when it's implemented. Are you seeing that image? You're not seeing an image?
We see it.
See it. Okay, cool. So that was one thing that came up, but I guess just, was unnecessary. So we're seeing that a lot. Things are changing so fast that we are improvising and then being happy when another technology takes over, another producer. So that's my main list. But Anthony had put himself on the list, and I think after that, if there's makers from other spaces that want to share what they're doing, I'll call on you guys. And then I also, if the city of New Haven has joined, pipe in. I haven't seen you guys. I saw you pop in for a minute, so maybe schedules didn't work out. But Anthony, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, thanks, JR. And hi, everybody. I want to start just by saying that I joined this call the first time it happened, and it was the most inspiring evening I had at the beginning of this outbreak, and this one is just the same. I think it's incredible to see what all of you are doing. As someone who's not a maker and well versed in this kind of distributed production, I just really appreciate it. And on that note, that's sort of the reason I put myself on the list, because I'm working with a small collaborative of people to put together an event in this time. Yes, an event. We are working on a new project called At Home in New Haven. It's going to be a week's worth of virtual programming designed to showcase and support the artists, makers, movement builders, small businesses that call New Haven home. And it's essentially going to be a virtual stage that we're going to put up for people to gather around and be inspired and learn from one another. And it'll be a whole range of programming from musical performance and other artistic performance to bread making to meditation and everything in between. I've talked about this with Leor a bit, about doing a sort of a panel discussion about what's been learned through this process for him and folks he's been working with. And Kate and I have connected. The sewing circles, I think, is a perfect example of something that, if it's ongoing and can just come onto the platform for that week, just to give it more exposure, lift it up, and help raise some money for the projects y'all are working on. So I just wanted to come on and extend that to this community of makers. If folks have DIY sessions they'd like to propose to show folks how to build something at home, does not have to be PPE related. It's as long as it's sort of fun or utilitarian for people, that's great. And if you have other session ideas, that's great too. The site will be live on Friday. Although JR, if I can present real quick, I can show.
Sure, go for it.
Where it stands right now. So can you all see this?
It's coming. Yeah, there it is.
Okay. Yeah, so we're building this out right now. And it's really, the functionality is all there. It's just a matter of populating it at this point. So, we're working on it, and we'd love to have folks submit via this screen here, submit ideas for sessions once this goes live. And so that'll be at www.athomeinnewhaven.com. So that's going to be May 4th through the 10th. That event's going to happen. So I just want to put that on folks' radars and invite y'all to submit session ideas for that, and want to lift up the work y'all are doing.
Well, thank you, Anthony. Were there any questions before we move on to other things folks got?
Anthony, I was just wondering if memory serves, I feel like around that time is typically Art Walk, and I'm wondering is this in conjunction in any way with Art Walk, or is this a separate endeavor?
Art Walk, no, it's separate from Art Walk. I'm not actually, that's not one of the other events that's on the radar that we're talking with. We're talking with the city and Together New Haven about the stuff they're working on. Someone just said Art Walk has been canceled or postponed. There's a bunch of stuff that is moving to virtual though, and if it's during that time frame, we'd love to know about it and talk with them.
Great.
Anthony, I'm Francesca with Town Green District. If we're able to make it work with something that kind of relates to our district and downtown, or if you, let's say, get a bread baker that's a business downtown or something like that, I'd like to work with you and see if we can help sponsor a couple sessions or something like that, or
Awesome.
artists. So just keep me posted. I'll put, I put my email in the chat earlier, but I can put it again. That way you have it.
Okay, great.
Your dog's getting shout outs.
Yeah, the dog's getting shout outs.
I turned my video off because he keeps running everywhere and eating everything that I love. So thank you.
Great. So just another small project. Lior, you're right there. Do you want to just show a picture of the strain relief that's being 3D printed? And for folks that have 3D printers, that might be... Lior, are you hearing me?
I am indeed, yep.
Oh, cool. Can you aim the camera down towards the strain relief just so people get an idea of what that is?
Yep.
For the mess? Yeah.
Yeah, give me... Go. So I was talking with another doctory person, and a big comfort problem is having masks so there's masks that attach around your ears or behind your head, and often those straps will become really uncomfortable because it's a lot of force being applied over a small area, and if it becomes uncomfortable, people tend to fiddle with it and move it, which is obviously not what we want. So these are two designs. They're modifications of a design that's been pretty popular. I actually printed some of the original design like these and just found that they weren't that great. Like the only people who they would stay on were women with buns tied up in the back of their head, and then this could rest on top of the bun, which is not everyone. So these are two other designs. This one is for an N95 design. This is for a surgical mask. And we're still doing some testing in the hospital with having people just wear these all day. So I don't want to sort of have people go crazy printing these quite yet. But hopefully by tomorrow, we should have the designs finalized. And then we'll definitely post these designs on the MakeHaven site and probably on Facebook and whatnot, and certainly Slack, so people can print these out and drop them off at MakeHaven to be used at the hospital for those, or for personal use for whoever has a 3D printer sitting idle.
And just to be clear, it's for elastic bands, so they don't rub on your ears. They hook on those little notches, and it's a strap that goes around the back of your head. Is that
Yeah, so there's
clear enough description. Yeah.
There's this kind of mask that has loops that go around your ears, and then there's the N95 kind of mask, which I have somewhere, that has two straps that go around the back of your head, and both of them get uncomfortable after an extended period.
Great. Thank you, Lior. And also, just kind of a shout out to, there's a team at Medtronic, and they've been doing a little skunk works and coming up with trying to repurpose a bunch of masks that were missing elastic bands and those sorts of things. So there's other folks that weren't able to join us who are working in parallel. And with that in mind, are there any other folks from different makerspaces? I saw a few of your names on here. Do you want to update us on what you're doing, how your projects are evolving, or things that you saw here that you had questions or wanted to jump off of? I think Drew, are you you want to speak about what you guys are doing?
Drew Gates here from Makerspace CT. We are presently producing face shields that are going to first responders and hospitals in Hartford, and in the greater Hartford area. We're moving forward. We've kind of worked out the kinks in our operations. We've started to refer some of the production to local suppliers that can produce more than we were able to produce in the shop. But everything so far is going smoothly.
Great. And I anticipate collaborating on events and activities once we get past the medical device production.
My focus is on the education side, so I've been working to move as much of our education program that relies on hardware to, online classes that can't rely on hardware. So we're looking forward to collaborating in any way that can work out as well.
Excellent. And I know Vladimir was on here. If you wanted to jump in, Vladimir, you're welcome to.
Hey, JR. Mainly, I just wanted to see how you guys were doing and what the updates were. We've been kind of in the same situation with Drew there with Hartford, mainly focusing on the face shields and supplying them to local organizations. So, we found like we could handle, like you were saying, like the small packages, like a food pantry that contacted us that needed a few. The State Department of Developmental Services has a group home here, and we just got 150 face shields to them. And there's a few of those coming in. So yeah, it was great to hear though that you're saying, so if you get a big order, that there are actual states or facilities here in the state that can meet those. So are they having a shortage of those at all, or are they able to keep up with the demands, the big demands? Like, has that caught up, do you think? Or I don't know if you know, but.
Yeah, so Lior might be able to jump in and speak more eloquently about this, but essentially my understanding is that they are really getting ramped up so that we are seeing we're seeing enough production, although there's a delay of a few days sometimes, and some of them are backlogged to a degree. So the small production still can be useful. But Lior, go ahead.
No, that was just a phone call from the doctor who is helping test the head straps at the hospital. And he said the straps work for a minority of people. So he doesn't think we should start cranking them out that design quite yet. We should try doing other designs to see if we can find something a little more universal, or just come up with a whole gallery of different shapes that people can try to fit their heads and hairs and whatnot.
Yeah, so the actual, so Vladimir, we're getting a echo from you, so if you just turn down your speaker a little bit. But Lior, the question was about the production ability. And I had just said that generally things were coming online for mass producers. It's just there's a couple of day delay. And so that's why filling in for smaller orders with like Makerspace is doing that has been the main focus. I don't know if you had anything to add to that.
Are we talking about things in general or one thing in particular?
Sorry, face shields. Face shields was the topic.
Yeah, it's definitely, I think the trick is connecting the supply and the demand. Capital is also a problem. Like they can produce 1 million face shields and ship them over, but that takes about $1 million, and most places don't need 1 million shields. So if someone felt enterprising, they could spend $1 million, get 1 million shields, and then sell them for $2 a piece and make a lot of money selling face shields by the hundreds or thousands. So I think that's probably a pretty big block, is just the shipping cost is high. So most places aren't able to get them from those really big suppliers.
And are you guys making them, or are you just referring them to the suppliers now?
So at this point, I'm preferentially referring them to suppliers if possible. The last order that we fulfilled was to MakeHaven Fire and Police because we had the material and it's New Haven Fire and Police, and they didn't, they only wanted 100. So that was relatively easy. So we have 2 suppliers that we found, one sort of local small scale and one international large scale. There are also a lot of local manufacturers that are looking for things to make. So if anyone knows any medium large scale manufacturer that does die cutting plastic stuff or could pivot to that, then this would be a pretty good opportunity. I mean, it's a pretty simple design.
Yeah. And we'll be looking for manufacturers as we start to assemble or start to look to manufacture the ventilator, if assuming that we move to those stages.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to ask, was there anybody else who had something to share as far as a project that they were working on or developing, who I didn't call on, who wanted to pull the wisdom or make connections within this group? All right, is that Mark said sure to me? I think, and Ben. So whoever unmutes first.
Okay, I think that's me.
That's Ben. You got it.
I just wanted to give really quick shout out to everybody that worked on the face shields for the last 4 days or so. I was volunteering at a New Haven facility that is taking care of coronavirus positive patients who are homeless and do not require hospitalization. And we've been using the MakeHaven face shields and they are great. And I was really happy to be part of a community that made that happen, and really happy that, I could use them for, my own safety.
That's awesome. Thank you, Ben. I mean, it helps to make it real.
Yep. And any other groups that are working on face shields that are not MakeHaven, if you're not getting enough feedback from people about how your face shields are working, I have now warned the ones that we made, and I can give you some hints on what made these ones work better than some others that I've tried.
Yeah. And so Mark said he had something to share as well. Mark, are you able to unmute?
Yeah. Hi.
Great. Yep.
Yeah, actually, I want to shout out to Rose, who's on this call as well. She's been working on. We have a small group of people, makers with 3D printers, who've been making face shields at a couple samples here. I'm bringing about 200 down to New London probably Wednesday, with the hospital which has a need. And so we have a small group. We've done maybe about 300 of them. The visors, and we found plastic and elastic and all that. And because we have a team together, or just a group of people who are interested in helping out however they can, I think what I'd like to get from the group is what would be the best use for a team of people with 3D printers. What could we shift our time toward that would be the most productive?
Great. Well, I have. I think we can bring that question, everybody. But first, Colin said he had just like a quick tip, so I want to make sure that he's able to share his quick tip, and then we'll get to that bigger question. Colin, you want to jump in?
Sure. So it actually segues in pretty well with the 3D printing question. So I've got one of these handmade masks, right? One of the things that I've noticed about these laces that's kind of annoying is you have to tie them every time you use them. So if you have a 3D printer and you're making masks, I highly recommend you print one of these out. I can give you the link for it if you want. But basically it just allows the straps to go together. So all you have to do is put it around your head and then pull it tight, and then it's there. So you don't have to really mess with it a lot. And if you have a 3D printer, you can probably crank 100 of these out every day if you want. So that's my tip.
Yeah.
Colin, that looks really cool. I'm curious, is there a specific strap for the straps that you're tying? Is there a width that accommodates? Is that important?
Yeah, and you can, I can crank out a bunch of different widths for them if you want to give me like a range. But the straps on this particular mask that my mom made actually are 10 millimeters. So I just made the width for this like 12 or 14 millimeters. But if you need any certain widths, let me know and we can work with that.
Yeah. Did you design that initially, Colin, or did you pull that from a?
Nope, I found it online and I just edited the design. I can give the original link as soon as I figure out how to get it on here.
Very cool. Very cool. And did anybody else have anything to pipe in? And then we'll jump back to Mark's open-ended question. Okay. So Mark's question, if I can paraphrase, is, how do we use the army of folks who are willing to help, some with 3D printers, some with other tools? Are there additional thoughts that Colin has the one? Are there additional thoughts of how to leverage that? Is that a fair recap of your statement, Mark?
Yeah, we're happy to make face shields, but we're hearing that there is inexpensive sources for this. So we want to make sure that whatever we're making sort of on a bespoke basis is really the best thing to be making.
Great. Any feedback or thoughts from Mark? Well, maybe the folks will feel we do have some ideas there, of course. And I think that there's just an incredible repository online of different ideas. And I know one thing we've struggled with and had a lot of conversations about is like the face masks and whether or not those could be sanitized. And so there's all these choices. And I think our thought is to keep trying new things. And that's the beauty of the 3D printers, is we can iterate, and particularly where they're small items, we can actually reach a volume that has a larger reach.
I wanted to just jump in. I think the ideas that Dora and Colin presented about little things that can make the mask fit better are certainly a helpful thing, both for the hospitals and for the community partners, the organizations that are needing them. Those are helpful, and those are certainly something that I could help distribute along with the masks if those end up being produced. I saw in the chat there was a note about making other PPE. I think the chat mentioned gowns specifically, and this is something that just came up on one of our last calls, our gowns and caps, and I was actually going to reach out to Yale New Haven, to our contact there, to see what kind of need they have. But if anyone who is on this call has any information about that, we were going to start looking at some patterns or anything like that we can kind of put in our back pocket to have if that need arises. I've heard from some individuals that might become a need, and if that is, we'd love to be prepared for that.
Great. I think that everyone has had a chance, and we've shared a lot of information. We're coming up on the hour. And so I think this is a good time to close this. I think we will likely do another similar roundtable in a week. And from hosting these, it's been great to see the progress, to see us finding new ways to get effective solutions, and also to adapt to the changing need and requirements. So I thank you all for being part of it, being part of the solution, and everything you're doing, and we'll continue to work on. I'm excited to see what the impact will be, and what we'll come up with next. So unless there's any burning closing questions or statements, I think I'll call a formal end to this this meeting. And if folks want to hang out and talk more informally afterwards, that's great as well. So I think we'll call it, and I'll thank you for being here.